All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind. But we're going to have a show.
What up, everybody? The show is on. Yeah. Mark Thompson,
Yay.
thank you for that smattering of applause. Thank you. Very well done.
Sorry,
Yes.
got a little excited there.
It's a bit overwhelming. I'm humbled by your affections. Mark Thompson here. We've got our full crew, don't we? Where's our crew?
Morning.
Kim, how are you?
Yes.
Morning.
Fabulous producer John
Fabulous
Daly.
producer John Daly.
And the whole crew. Thank you very much. Yes. All right. Well, I'm thinking specifically, I know you can make fun, but I'm thinking specifically of Tony, who is also known by Chris.
Chris, thank you.
Because we only have that one drop. So Tony is the straw that stirs the technical drink. So it's really great to have him here. You can interact with us, text us by simply on the YouTube chat, jumping in.
Why don't you just text it?
Yeah, and please share your thoughts. Your thoughts are part of the show. I got a couple of emails asking about calls. We are working on that as well. This is our first full week launching, so it's it's all just coming together. But we're definitely looking at all sorts of ways, even beyond calls, that listeners can interact. Before I get any further, I want to mention that the Mark Thompson Show is presented by our founding sponsor, tax attorney Steve Moskowitz. For more than 30 years, Steve has put his tax knowledge to work for individuals and businesses alike. If you need help with your taxes, give Steve a call. It's 888-TAX-DEAL. You can also reach him on the web, MoskowitzLLP.com. We'll talk to Steve in person, of course, as we do every day. But I definitely want you to know we appreciate Steve, and a guy of that level being part of this show as a sponsor and our exclusive sponsor is really gratifying, and it's something that you should take advantage of. In other words, you should call Steve. Again, it's 888-TAX-DEAL. We have the new email address, themarkthompsonshow@gmail.com, if you want to reach us, themarkthompsonshow@gmail.com. The way it works here is you like the show. You have to like each individual show that we do, if you would, please.
Nobody
As we
likes
say,
her.
nobody likes it. You smash the like button.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Smash it with your iron rod if you want to. Smash it.
Smash it with your iron
And
rod.
by smashing it, it helps us in the algorithm. And of course, subscribe. So between subscribing and smashing
Smash
it, you'll be
with
able
your
to
iron
really help
rod.
us, in the algorithms
I'm gonna
overall. on
smash it
YouTube.
right now.
You got to
That's what I'm
smash
gonna
it,
do.
kids. Smash, smash,
Hey,
smash.
Kim, where's your whip?
Mm.
Oh, I don't think I can whip it. I think I must smash it.
You have to first
You can
smash,
whip
then
it.
you can whip.
You can
Yeah,
whip
then
it
you can
real
whip
good.
it. Yeah.
Feels great, baby.
Feels great. Yeah. Big news everywhere. I almost don't know where to start. I'm going to back burner what's happening in Ukraine and Russia. There's been loss of life, drone strikes. Russian fighter went down, actually. I'm talking about a jet went down because of engine failure, supposedly. But that continues to be a humanitarian crisis of substantial proportion. 30% of the country is without power. In Ukraine, I'm talking about, because of power stations knocked out. They're going for critical infrastructure. There's bombing in Kyiv. There's all of that. In this country, in addition to everything we have in California, water woes and all the rest, there's a new variant. In fact, there are two new variants coming, which is I don't think you want to call them new variants. Dr. Fauci with a warning. Two new fast-spreading Omicron COVID subvariants are pretty troublesome.
That's not fake.
No.
That's real.
And the deal with these, I'll just give you a little bit more on this, because it is frightening. As winter inches closer, Fauci is sounding the alarm, a pair of what he calls pretty troublesome COVID variants. They're two descendants of the Omicron variant. Remember, Omicron, in general, not as intense a symptomology associated with it, if that's the appropriate word. And if it is the appropriate word, it deserves a ding, by the way. Symptomology, yeah. But when you get Omicron, might be another way to put it, it won't be as bad as prior variants, but it's far more infectious. So against that far more infectious backdrop comes these new two descendants, BQ1 and BQ11. Both have dangerous qualities, says Fauci. Qualities or characteristics that could evade some of the interventions we have.
That's not fake. That's real.
It's always great when we find out the realities concerning how evasive the vaccine strategies end up being. In other words, the virus is so potent and it mutates so quickly that it's able to evade so many of the existing technologies, and those technologies are essentially associated with a vaccine. So that's what they talk about. I mean, when he says evade some of the interventions we have, that's what he means. But he means one other thing. He means that these subvariants are not responsive once you get this particular strain. They're not responsive to some of the monoclonal treatments that have been used in hospitalization cases and also in cases beyond hospitalization. There are people using the monoclonal treatments that are not in the hospital. So that's the other, when he talks about intervention, it's basically, I think, twofold. It's the vaccines and it's the monoclonal antibody treatment. There's no guarantee that that these strains will eventually overtake BA.5 as the dominant variant, but if they do spread rapidly, they could threaten to reverse this nationwide decline in COVID cases. As much as you want to feel good, he says, about the fact that cases are down, hospitalizations are down, we don't want to declare victory too much prematurely. And that's the reason why we've got to keep our eyes on these emerging variants.
That's not fake. That's real.
The other thing you said, and then I'm going to get to California and what's happening here, because it's sort of wild what's happening with COVID. Fauci said the strains have a concerning doubling time. That refers to how quickly they spread, right? The UK Health Security Agency reported that the strains even demonstrate a growth advantage over BA.5, which was considered the most contagious COVID strain to date. So you've got scientists from around the world working to come up with even newer vaccines, they say. There is a vaccine out now, as you're aware. It's the bivalent vaccine, right? It treats the original COVID and it treats this new strain. But now we're finding that, these infections are capable of evading that treatment. That's troubling in the extreme. But what's happening in California is that there was a declaration by Governor Newsom. I had this piece. See if I can find it. Otherwise, I'll just tell you from memory. The COVID declaration that the state of emergency around COVID is going to end here in California, and the governor has declared this. He announced on February 28th that he's going to end the state of emergency, right? That was the one that's been in place, for almost 3 years. So he's saying, look, the worst of COVID is over. He said almost those exact words. That's happening in an environment where Santa Clara health officials, for example, are pleading for people to get the latest COVID booster. So you can see how these things are two things are at odds with each other, and it's not helping to get more people those shots because there is a weird sense of we're all breathing a sigh of relief and
it's over. Yeah,
it's over.
I don't think it'll ever really be over, but how long can you have an emergency?
We want it to
right?
be over.
Yeah,
exactly. We want it to be over. We want to declare it over.
That's not fake.
Yeah.
That's real.
The governor's office said the state of emergency was an effective and necessary tool that we utilized to protect our state. We wouldn't have gotten to this point without it, he says. I mean, I know it's controversial. There are certainly some who think that the mandates went too far and all this sort of thing. But at the same time, it's going to make it harder for public health officials to convince people to get these bivalent boosters. And you've got winter coming. You'll have more people inside. You'll have more congregate settings during the holidays. There are many more opportunities for this virus, even just the existing variant, to spread. And now, as I mentioned, there are 2 other variants as well. So you've got Sarah Cody, who's the public health director in Santa Clara County, saying, we need people to get these injections. She addressed a group at the county fairgrounds where a cavernous hall was set up to inject the Omicron-specific boosters. That cavernous hall, nearly empty. So even as she's encouraging people to take their children, take your parents, take a family member, make appointments, get boosted, get protected, so that the fall and winter holidays can be enjoyed, she says, without fear that COVID is going to take you out in some serious way. Even as she's saying that, there is a sense, as John says, of like, okay, well, this is done. Who do the Niners play this weekend? So we got a lot of these vaccines around. I mean, there's not going to be the shortage. You remember the early days of the vaccine where, you had people elbowing each other to get the vaccine, elbowing each other out of the way. You had people phonying up information to try to, remember, it was in the early stages, it was only available to healthcare workers. And it was viewed as a lifeline. And it might indeed have been a lifeline. But now, as I say, you have all of these shipments of the booster. It's now available to children 5 to 11, and they're pushing for that part of the population to get those shots. Only 12% of eligible residents of Santa Clara County, for example, are boosted. So that's what's happening on COVID. And so the other thing I would just mention is that the CDC, the revelations around the CDC and what's happening there, they dovetail perfectly with what we talked about the CDC. The CDC was sweated like crazy by the Trump administration to erase and alter their judgments about COVID so as to play it down. These are all things we spoke of. I mean, it was clear that there were so many cross currents, and that's the reason I told you at the time that Fauci became this big deal, right? Fauci became a big deal. Fauci been around forever. Did you know who Fauci was? I didn't know who Fauci was. I mean, once he stepped up, I looked him up. I go, oh my God, he was around for HIV and all this sort of thing. And you see this, he's got a distinguished history. Now, he's also a problematic figure. You may have issues with Fauci, et cetera, and I can take a meeting about that another time. But what I'm simply trying to say is the reason he grew to mythic status within this culture is because he existed at a time when you knew you were getting BS from the prior administration, the Trump administration. And even the Trump CDC was being sweated like crazy. They were being told to essentially dry clean the results of what they knew about COVID and how big a threat it was. So these revelations are all coming to light, and CDC officials are describing intense pressure they feel or felt. I think the agency is still politicized. But they also felt job threats from the Trump White House. There were literally memos saying, fire all of them. If they're at odds with the White House, fire all of them. Several public officials detailed a months-long campaign sparked by Trump appointees and their belief that grim assessments of the pandemic reflected poorly on the president. It led the 32-year veteran of the CDC. This Shout is the name. Or I think that's, or Shukot, maybe that's how this says the name, to openly wonder if she would be fired in the summer of 2020. The latest report offers insight into key flashpoints, like a CDC-backed plan to require masks on public and commercial transportation. You remember they came out with that in the summer of 2020? They cited evidence that the requirement would reduce COVID risk to travelers. They also suggested quarantines, you'll remember. All of these things were fought by the White House and by political appointees that occupied the White House. So, and this is, we're finding this all out. And, you know, that Redfield, who is the, Robert Redfield was the former director. He talks in detail about how he felt that there was so much pressure from the White House that the CDC began to lose credibility. Now, we can take a meeting about how much credibility the CDC should have on any number of issues, but now it's coming out that you'd never had that kind of sweat put on the CDC by the White House, and that's what's happened now. So there's a huge reports coming out, 2,100 pages of transcribed interviews with a ton of CDC officials at the highest levels of the CDC, and that's where this is all coming from. It's a committee report. So I think it's a bit, on one level, shocking to hear the specifics. And on another level, as I say, we were talking about it for a while, and it was obvious we weren't hearing the real story because you had a president who was trying to paint a sunny picture. COVID's going away, it's a hoax, et cetera. So it was in that environment that Fauci seemed to be a clearer head who wasn't afraid of speaking his mind. And that's how I think the mythology around Anthony Fauci grew. Did you see what happened with James Corden? This is kind of wild. James Corden, everybody knows James Corden is the late night host. He's also immensely talented. He's a Broadway star. I mean, theater actor out of Britain. He's also
carpool karaoke.
I love his show. He's got a great. Yeah. I really will tell you, he is a good. Because I'm about to do a story that's not so flattering to him, but he's super talented.
And he's a fun guy.
Yeah. But James Corden he's been banned from a restaurant in New York.
Who would ban James Corden?
Because apparently he was rude to the staff.
Oh.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like it fits his personality, does it?
No, it's totally inconsistent with his personality. It reminds me a bit of who? Who else has
not you?
No, not yet.
Do you know who I am?
No.
Kind of a big guy.
No, I'm thinking of Ellen. Remember, Ellen was sort of she was the belle of the ball for a while, right?
Mm-hmm. You have one kind of clean-cut persona where you're nice and kind. It turns out not to be who you really are.
Exactly. So, restaurateur Keith McNally took to Instagram to ban James Corden from the Balthazar restaurant. He was reportedly rude to his staff. You want me to read the Instagram post?
Yeah,
I will.
Well, like, what kind of rude? Like, how rude? Like, go get me another thing and without saying please, or worse?
Yeah, where, John, where is it? I thought it was right here. It's a
was
BuzzFeed
he pinching
story.
Bottoms and being nasty? Or
no, I think it was, no, he was rude in the first way you indicated, from what I'm told. Don't be a jerk to the wait staff. Seems like James Corden may not have gotten the memo on that one, and he's paying the price. He is effectively banned from this very famous restaurant in New York. In this post, Keith calls James a tiny cretin of a man. He claims that he was the most abusive customer to my Balthazar servers since the restaurant opened 25 years ago.
Wow.
He details two recent alleged examples of how James Corden had treated Balthazar's waitstaff, while also noting that he behaved similarly at Keith's former restaurant, Cafe Luxembourg, a few years back. Oh, this guy's got history with James Corden.
What kind of an a-hole do you have to be? Like, how bad? Imagine the things you would say to wait staff to be banned.
Yeah.
Don't talk to me that way.
In the first example, Keith alleges that James was extremely nasty to his server and demanded another round of drinks, as well as his tables. Well, he's not allowed to order another round of drinks. Okay, I don't know. Maybe it's the way he did it.
Bring me another round.
As well as his table's drink orders comped. Oh, he wanted them comped altogether.
Your service
he
is
said
so
this
inferior,
way.
I should get things for free.
Oh, but then he said this. This way, I won't write any nasty reviews in Yelp or anything like that. Wow. According to Keith, again, he owns the restaurant. The second incident took place at lunch. Corden's wife, Julia Carey, received her egg yolk omelet, only to find that there was some egg white mixed in. Oh my God. That's
not fake. That's real.
When the dish was remade and brought back to the table, it featured a side of home fries instead of a salad. And that's when James allegedly lost his cool. You can't do your job, he said. You can't do your job. Keith claims that James yelled at the server and continued, maybe I should go into the kitchen and cook the omelet myself. Eventually, the situation was resolved with glasses of complimentary champagne, but Keith also claims that James was pleasant to the floor manager, but nasty to the server. Apparently, he's apologized. Yeah. But I'm not sure, exactly what he said. I mean, it could have been.
Their envy, wanton killing.
No, I was looking for my bad. Is that what
My bad.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
That would have been better if I hadn't had asked for him. James Corden could have apologized in all these different ways, but
my words upset so many people.
Yeah, apparently that's a good way. What are the other ways?
I misspoke.
I misspoke's a good one. Yeah.
I stand corrected.
That's a good one too. The Asian community. You want to?
And I wanted to apologize to the Asian community,
yeah.
the Asian American community.
So James Corden was banned from Balthazar. He's apologized in all those ways, and we'll see if he's allowed back in.
You can't be that big of a celebrity and go out into the world and be a complete jerk and not have people know about it. People are going to,
I agree.
You're recognizable. People are going to, even in the restaurant, people were probably looking over going, oh my God, what's he doing?
There is a responsibility that comes with being that high profile, right? I mean, you can't just come in with,
no.
In fact, I'd suggest you have to be nicer.
Absolutely.
Because people know who you are.
Do you know who I am?
Exactly.
I'm kind of a big deal.
You have to be nicer.
You don't want to end up on one of those websites, the worst celebrities you ever met.
Right.
That's not the place to be. My grandmother used to send everything back. You knew when the plate hit the table, it was not it was like the second or third plate that would stay. That she would say, it used to be mortifying. My mom and I would be like, oh my God, not again. Not again. It's not warm enough. It's not cooked right. It's not there's some people that just, you can never make them happy.
Yeah. And on some level, I say servers understand that, I've always said, if I were a server, it would be difficult, I'm sure at times, but I'd be completely, obsequious and completely helpful. And there'd be no point at which I'd go, hey, you know what? This is the way they cook it. If you don't like it, I mean, I just don't think that's the way to be as a server. Obsequious is a ding word. You're right.
Well, as somebody who worked as a bartender and
yes.
Had to serve food at one point, I can tell you that's theoretical and that's what you want. But when it's 10 p.m., 11 p.m. at night on a Saturday,
and producer John Daly,
and your meter is in the red, if you think of it as like a pressure meter,
yeah, that's true.
It gets to a point where you cannot handle it because 20 people have done that to you in a row, and everyone has their limits. Some people are better at it. Some people are, what we jokingly said, dead inside. Don't worry, I'm already dead inside. I can handle it. And other people are, more emotional. But even the best of us, I lost my cool a couple times. When people are screaming at you in your face, when they're inches away from you, in your face. Imagine.
That would be pretty.
Listen to me. I don't want to hear you.
Yeah, exactly.
the music's blasting. The music's blasting. It's Saturday night. Imagine.
Yeah, when fabulous producer John Daly turns.
Fabulous producer John Daly
loses his stuff.
I don't want to be there. The other side of that. That is not pretty.
Yeah, I don't think you should apologize for how you feel.
I think you should apologize for how you feel. Actually, just the opposite. Anyway,
I did get assaulted. I had a glass thrown at my head and a beer bottle.
Oh
no!
Sayonara, sucker.
And you know why? Do you know why? I asked them not to block the flap in the bar. You know how there's a flap in the bar so the barbacks can get in and out?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
I just asked them not to block that. They turned around and said, nobody tells us what to do.
Wow.
So that's alcohol for you.
Wow.
Try ignoring it, sir.
Yeah, I don't know.
Wow.
I think that's true, though. When people get juiced up, man, they're likely to do anything.
Well, and it depends what their personality's like, right? It amplifies personality.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true, too. Maybe you have a story of somebody losing it in a restaurant or bar situation, or maybe you yourself had been pushed to the very limits of your tolerance. Hey, let me tell you something about servers. They can be rude also. It's not like every server is, there can be a lot of attitude that you get on the server end that you're all of a sudden as a patron going, how do I, smile enough and be pleasant enough to
turn
get this
their
back
day.
to magnetic north. Exactly.
Although there's that one restaurant in San Francisco where people go there just because the server is horribly rude. There's Like, you order something and they're like, you don't need that. You too fat.
Oh,
you don't know.
that
No,
is-
that's not the right order.
That's pretty funny.
I mean, they're horrible to you, but the worse they are, the more people at the table laugh and have a good time with it. So.
Oh my God! With that, you need to. I don't know what you need. You need to be probably a little. You think maybe on some weed. You need to be a little stoned to handle that in that way, right?
Where are my weed smokers at?
That I do think a table of weed smokers, they would laugh at that probably. But I think, as John says, if you've had a couple of pops, you can, I think, likely not handle that aggression. But if people are going there, they know that there's that aggression. That's a different thing. It's almost like an item on the menu. You're ordering the aggression with everything. Yeah, right. So I get it. That's true. So you can reach us on the text line.
Why don't you just text it?
In the YouTube chat. You'll see the chat. You log on to YouTube, and all you need to do is log into YouTube. I mean, you don't need to start your own channel or anything. You just need to log in. Once you've logged in, you can join us in the chat. You can also hit us with the email. It's themarkthompsonshow@gmail.com. The key with YouTube is also to subscribe to the channel, please. I know this is a weird thing to have to constantly repeat, but we have to as we try to launch this channel. We hope that you'll subscribe, and then you've got to smash that like button.
Smash it with your
Smash
iron
that,
rod.
the thumbs up. Smash it. Hit it every single show, because that in the algorithm helps us stay alive. There are all these things we have to do to stay alive. Of course, the big thing we need, unfortunately, is money, and that can be done through our Patreon link. So if you go to themarkthompsonshow.com, there's a link to the Patreon, there's a link to YouTube. So themarkthompsonshow.com is all you need to know.
I would like to note, I tried to send someone the link to themarkthompsonshow.com last night, but I accidentally off the. Or
no. You need the. That's why I go
Google,
and I take
Google
a little beat.
Put a space in between the and Mark Thompson. They automatically try to correct you.
Yeah,
it turns out the link I sent was to Mark Thompson, a Christian ventriloquist. That is not you. Mark Thompson show without the that is the Christian ventriloquist. Who even knew there was such a thing? Not you.
Oh my
it's
God!
Not our Mark
I'm a bottle watch in Sam's.
Yeah, I don't know who the Christian ventriloquist is, but
MarkThompsonShow.com.
I love it. I love that there's a Mark Thompson ventriloquist out there. I think it's maybe it's not a bad thing at all.
Let me kick down the door and talk to my cheap sons and daughters.
Where's your puppet?
Well, they're not cheap. The puppet. You can have the puppet say that. You can have the puppet call them cheap. Oh. Has anybody ever seen the Will Ferrell ventriloquist bit that he did on SNL? Oh my God, it's so funny. It's really funny. There are two great ventriloquist bits, and I'm going to tell you both of them, but you have to promise me you stay here on this YouTube channel. You can look them up later, okay? I'll tell you what. You stay here, you smash the like button, and you also subscribe. But what I will do is I will tell you these bits, and I will post links to them on my Twitter feed.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Yeah, smash that like button, and let me tell you the two bits quickly. One bit, I'm not going to do the whole bit for you. I'm just going to tell you what they are, and then, as I say, I'll post links on my Twitter feed, which is @MarkT Live. So, Will Ferrell is a ventriloquist, and he goes up on stage, and he does his ventriloquist act, and the people in the audience believe that he is the dummy is real. They start to believe it because the dialogue, of course, between them represents that the dummy is real, and they feel that the dummy is being abused in some way because that's the whole bit. Like, get this guy's hand out of my, you know what I mean? That's the whole thing. All right.
Okay.
And then what happens after that really begins to push the limits of that bit, and it's very, very funny. And the other classic ventriloquist bit still makes me cry with laughter, and it's Albert Brooks doing a ventriloquist act. He did it two places that I know. He did it on The Tonight Show, and he did it on the Flip Wilson Show, which is an old show from the 70s. Albert Brooks does and he has just the opposite relationship with the dummy, which is one of like just not even carrying the dummy. At one point he throws the dummy down he just drops the dummy. You know what I mean? Like as he grabs a cigarette or something. It's really funny, and I hope you'll scout out those two. I'll post the links, but it's cool. Will Ferrell, Albert Brooks, ventriloquist stuff. So
I'm impressed that you have ventriloquist recommendations.
Yes, I do. I have a number of different recommendations. I'll be providing them to our favorite
look who's joining us, Steve.
Oh, is Steve? Because I thought he was going to come a few minutes earlier. This is great.
Yeah, well, he's so busy helping people that he just got off the phone with the client.
That is good. Well done. He is our OG when it comes to sponsorships. He's joined us to help us launch. He is the great Steve Moskowitz, everybody. I call him the tax ninja. And Steve, thank you for being here. As I always say, thank you for supporting us. Thanking you for stepping up as you have so beautifully. Look, we talk about a lot of things. We talk about returns for individuals, talk about returns for businesses, and even small businesses at that. I think sometimes small businesses, I feel, could really use your services, because if you really know the tax code, small business can benefit immensely. And you do know that tax code. So tell me about ERC, which you've spoken up about before, and the ways in which it can help small and large businesses alike.
ERC is good for businesses from 1 employee to 500 employees. If you have more than 500, there's a different rule, which if you have more than 500, I'll tell you what the different rule is. But up to 500 covers most people that have a small business. And this is where the government can give you up to $26,000 for every qualified employee. And Mark, you talk about the benefit for small business. I look at the Fortune 500, and they have an army of people like me saying, okay, do this and this and this. And that's an army of people's full-time job is saving the Fortune 500 taxes. But a small business, the lifeblood of America, the heart and soul of America, the backbone of America, you have a lot of hard working people. And you know what? They don't even have time for this. They don't know it. And they think about their taxes once a year when they write that check and say, this is way too much, grumble, and then go back to working. We have so many clients, and I realize everybody's facts, circumstances, and results can differ. But if you just contact us, now it's October 18th, the end of the year is going to be here. We can talk about tax planning, and certainly ERC is part of your planning, but so is a lot of other things as well.
Well, I love that you are available at a critical time. Yeah, as people build businesses and as people need to, frankly, avoid paying maximum taxes. I mean, I'm not suggesting, and you don't suggest it either, doing anything illegal, but the law does permit you a lot of room, but you got to know where that room is. And ERC
let me tell you why,
yep.
if we have just a second.
Sure.
Everybody says, well, why do the Fortune 500 have all these benefits? There's two purposes to the tax law. One we all know about, is to collect money. But the other one is a system of incentives. In a democracy, the government can't order us to do something, even if it's good for the economy and the government wants you to do it. So how does the government get you to do something they want you to do, but they can't order you? They pay you with tax benefits. That's why you have all these tax advantages around. That is how you can do it. That's the reason it's in the law.
Love it. Thank you, Steve Moskowitz. You can reach Steve Moskowitz, of course, at moskowitzllp.com, 1-888-TAX-DEAL, 888-TAX-DEAL, 888-TAX-DEAL, or moskowitzllp.com. Thank you, Steve Moskowitz.
Thanks, Mark.
Love seeing you, sir.
How comforting it would be if you had a tax problem or the IRS was calling you and you didn't know what to do, to have that guy on your side. Like, I would just feel so much better about life.
I went in for a tax audit. I'll tell the story another time. By myself.
Oh, no.
No bueno. I wish I'd known Steve Moskowitz then. It's a wild.
But imagine,
it's now a wild idea,
it just won't work.
Now imagine that same situation with Moskowitz sitting next to you.
Oh my God! First of all, you don't have to go in at all. Steve would go in.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll take a quick break for news with Kim, and much to do on the other side, including talking to David Katz. We'll talk Trump. We'll talk the justice system. We'll talk the judicial walls closing in on Trump, or are they? We'll get to all of that next.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by tax attorney Steve Moskowitz at 888 Tax Deal. The CEO of one of the nation's largest investment banks is warning a recession is likely coming soon. Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon making the remark while speaking to CNBC. He added businesses need to be more cautious about their tolerance for risk. Governor Gavin Newsom, as we have heard here on the Mark Thompson Show, is setting a date to end the COVID-19 state of emergency. He said yesterday that the end date will be February 28th of 2023, mark 3 years since it was declared. Officials with the governor's office says it has been scheduled at that time because they're preparing for possible surges during the late fall and winter. Vice President Kamala Harris making the next move on her California trip. She is headed to San Francisco today to discuss the climate crisis and will then attend a Democratic finance event. A former state senator flew into Los Angeles yesterday to talk about protecting reproductive rights in the wake of Roe v. Wade being overturned. Close to 1 in 5 registered voters say politics have hurt their relationships with friends and family. A Siena College and New York Times poll shows independents and Democrats were more likely to say that disagreements affected their relationships at 21% and 20% respectively, compared to only 14% of Republicans. While majorities across all demographics said their relationships were unaffected, women and white voters with college degrees reported hurt relationships more often. There's a call among Republicans to impeach the head of Homeland Security. Texas Congressman Mike McCall says it's not about scoring political points, rather about holding the Biden administration accountable. He says more than 1,300 migrants have died on U.S. soil so far this year. A suspected serial killer in California going before a judge today. Charges against Wesley Brownlee could be revealed during his arraignment. He is accused of shooting 6 people to death since last year, most of them in Stockton, where he was arrested over the weekend. George Floyd's family is considering suing Kanye West after he claimed Floyd died from fentanyl. During a Drink Champs podcast, Ye claimed Floyd did not die from Officer Derek Chauvin's knee on his neck. While there were traces of fentanyl in Floyd's system, medical experts came to the conclusion Floyd died from a lack of oxygen. Lawyer Lee Merritt says, while one can't defame the dead, the family can sure sue for false statements about the manner of death. And I'll leave you with the gem. Here's a new horror film, apparently so scary that it has people fainting and vomiting in movie theaters. Terrifier 2 came out last weekend to tell the timeless tale of a resurrected murderous clown hunting down a teenage girl and her brother on Halloween. This film is reportedly gruesome to the point of causing extreme physical reactions. The executive producer warned viewers who are faint of heart, prone to lightheadedness, or have weak stomachs are advised to take extreme caution. Can you even imagine? That's a no for me. No, thank you, Terrifier 2. Nope, nope, nope. And what would you do if someone was vomiting next to you in the movie theater? I mean, I'm out.
Yeah, but there's nothing to juice the gate, nothing to juice ticket sales like that kind of warning, Don't come alone, don't watch alone. I love it. I love it.
I mean, it's gonna make you vomit.
By the way, I should tell you that the master, just apropos of this, the master of spooky, he is the master of spooky movies. He joins us in the second hour. Jeff Dixon. He's an annual visitor to this show.
We have to ask him about this one.
Yeah, we'll totally ask him about that. And he has some other recommendations and really want recommendations from the audience. That's next hour. Jeff Dixon joins. He comes every year around Halloween, so this will be a lot of fun.
Does he come and go on a rainbow?
No,
he does not. He does not. He should come and go with spooky music. I don't know. We got to try to cobble that together. But maybe we will. Maybe we'll go. You're right. Maybe we'll go the other way. We'll go the rainbow. Anyway, he's next hour. So.
This report sponsored by tax attorney Steve Moskowitz. For more than 30 years, Steve has put his tax knowledge to work for individuals and businesses alike. So if you need help with your taxes, give Steve a call. It is 888-TAX-DEAL, or you can catch him on the internet at MoskowitzLLP.com. I'm Kim McAllister on The Mark Thompson Show.
They had to close down an entire radio station to silence him. And now he's here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Thompson.
Y'all can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
Joe Fish, Sal the Shoemaker, Joe Box, and Little Anthony.
There's a reason that this place is fun.
What up, everybody? Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday, October 18th. I'll tell you a secret. When Pat Thurston was doing her show on the old radio station, I told Pat Thurston, after a conversation with this guy, our next guest, I told her I think that guy may be the best guest on KGO. Yeah, I think he's amazing. So I don't want to put too much pressure on him, but I do want to let you know that I'm really proud that we were able to organize getting this guy on. The former assistant U.S. attorney, such a clear-headed view of the charges that can be brought against the former president and just the justice system in general. Please welcome David Katz, everybody. Hi, David Katz.
Oh, we can't hear him.
We can't hear him yet.
Mm.
Yeah.
He looks good, though. Hi, David Katz.
Yeah.
You got to unclick your microphone. No.
What can we do to make David Katz? Yeah,
know.
That's right. Or he can just signal us in response to all my questions.
Can you please write everything on signs and flip them around? No.
He is not muted here, so it would be something on his end, I suspect. So we'll have our technical crew.
Maybe you can point to your ear.
How's it now? Am I coming?
Oh, there we go. David Katz, everybody. Come on.
Hey.
Hey, David Katz, first of all, again, I'm so excited that you're part of our show as we, try to get things off the ground. It's really cool to have an authority like yourself involved. So thank you.
Well, it's great to be with you. If I can just say, I was on 4 years ago on your station, the day that they issued the sports betting case, 5-4, and RBG was in the dissent. She wrote a compelling decision about how the feds had every right in the world to control sports betting because of its deleterious effects on the public and the findings that had been made by many of these state legislatures. And of course, RBG and the minority were overruled 5-4. And now we have this world where it's really kind of getting imposed on us, including by Proposition 27, which I don't know if I can editorialize, but I hope people vote against it because I think it's a really bad idea. It's a very regressive tax. And it's not something that the people wanted. It's something that the conservatives on the Supreme Court imposed on the country like they just did Dobbs.
Well, I also feel as though there's big money behind both 26 and 27, and it's bad big money. It's dirty money. I'd vote against both 26 and 27. We've talked about it here at length on a couple of occasions. I am a degenerate gambler. I love the action, and I have controlled it, meaning I don't put the rent money in play, but it's very easy to end up putting the rent money in play. And in these tough economic times that are likely to get a bit tougher, I just really worry about it. And look, I'm not looking for the government to be a protectorate necessarily, but I'm certainly not looking for the kind of availability and inundation that you're going to see. I mean, look at what FanDuel and MGM and all of these other entities are doing now with carpet bombing the air with ads. They have their own radio station now. Our station is turned over essentially to them. So I guess I see what you're talking about. I mean, it's if you care at all about these things that are poisonous to the public, I think you cannot vote yes on these propositions. But it's interesting that you say this because I want let me just turn that into a question. And you can comment on what I just said if you'd like. But I want to ask you, there is a weird arbitrariness that seems to connect to money when it comes to stuff like legalizing gambling or letting the states legalize it.
Well, there's a lot of money in legalized gambling and all sorts of other, call them quasi addictions. Some of them are out and out addictions, Mark. I think when they took over the cigarette company, I forget who it was who took over the cigarette company, but they said, I'm really surprised to see you making money off these death sticks. And his answer was, you make them for a penny, you sell them for $1, and they're addictive. And you're right. If you care, it maybe sounds very old fashioned, maybe it sounds paternalistic, but if you care about your fellow human beings on Earth and in this country, I think it is time to take a stand on some of these issues. And my point, Mark, was just that the Supreme Court had really given it the back of its hand about 4 years ago. And it was interesting that RBG was on the right side of that with the 4 dissenters. Now that vote would probably come out 6-3, without her and with the Trump justices on the Supreme Court. So that was my only thought on it. I thought it was an interesting little chestnut from 4 years ago on your old radio station.
Was RBG ever on the wrong side? I mean, it just seems to me like if she was for it, I'm pretty much for it, right?
Kim, that's a pretty good rule of thumb. So let's talk about Trump, who's always on the wrong side, including again, and called out by the January 6th committee, yet again.
Yeah, and I want to get to Trump in a second, but let me just double back to RBG because you mentioned her. I want to ask you a question, and you can tell me, should RBG have retired to open up that seat when it was possible to fill it with a more left-leaning or liberal judge?
Well, let me answer that in just a second. But Kim, you're right that she did make one wrong decision in her career. When she was going on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals before she went on the U.S. Supreme Court, she interviewed me to be one of her law clerks. She was still teaching at Columbia University School of Law. And I disagree with her judgment on hiring the other finalist and not me. Ever since then, Kim, I pretty much agreed with her. She wrote me a lovely letter, which I have up in my office. And if you're ever in Los Angeles, please come by. And you can see that in some of my artifacts of yesteryear. What was your question, Mark?
About her retiring early to allow the seat to be open.
Well, of course, with 2020 hindsight. And, the irony is that Justice Thurgood Marshall, legendary Thurgood Marshall, also didn't retire at the end of the Carter administration. And he ended up retiring under the first Bush. And, of course, the rest is history. He was replaced by Clarence Thomas. So you have two legends of the law, really, two legends of American history. And both of them should have retired a little earlier than they did. But, of course, that's with 2020 hindsight. And there's been a tendency now, Mark, it seems that people now put forward one of their law clerks to be the new Supreme Court justice. There's a lot of people who think that Kennedy wasn't going to step aside if it wasn't his former law clerk, Kavanaugh, who got the nod. And you certainly think that she could have helped one of her former clerks. Again, I wasn't one of them, but she had a few dozen of clerks because she served so many years on the Second Circuit and then on the, I'm not sure if she wasn't on the U.S. Court of Appeals. She interviewed me at Columbia, but it might have been. I don't want any of your callers to come in and have bad facts on the Mark Thompson show. But she was on the Court of Appeals and then on the Supreme Court for many years. So she had many former law clerks that she could have said, this person is terrific, and said to President Obama, this person ought to replace me, just like Thurgood Marshall could have done. Now, whether a president would do that or not, of course, the president often has some favorite that the president really wants to put forward. So they got into this kind of a tension. But yes, certainly in hindsight, because it would have been a terrific pick. It would have been a younger pick, and we wouldn't have had this situation with Barrett. She almost made it to Biden's term. And so you could
she did. I mean, she came close. It just, I almost think you don't need the 2020 hindsight, but that's for another day. You could see this train coming down the tracks and it ends up, rolling over us. But Thurgood Marshall's son, by the way, I went to school with. High school. I grew up in Washington, D.C. John Marshall.
Do you know who I am?
I didn't mean it that way.
We're playing D.C. geography, but Goody Marshall clerked on the same district court that I did. I clerked for the chief judge down on Constitution Avenue, and Goody Marshall was one of the law clerks for one of the other judges. I used to see him in the lunchroom. Great guy.
I love it. I love it.
Rubbing elbows with all the important folks.
Yeah. So tell me where we are after this hearing. There were revelations galore. You saw, I think you saw more beyond the White House in league with what happened. And I worry about those arms of government associated with the Justice Department. I worry about the military. I worry about others perhaps connected to this, Secret Service among them, that we really didn't know about at the time.
Well, Schumer said, if you saw this in a third world country, you'd know exactly what would happen. The leader of government, who refused to leave, although they were voted out, staged a coup to try to keep power, and they called on many levers of the government and state officials as well. And then after all the fraud and all the scams by Trump didn't work, then he turned to violence, and he incited that crowd. He knew that crowd was coming, that they were armed. He knew that they were there outside the ellipse armed. Mark, that's why he didn't want them to go through the magnetometers, because he knew that they would all be called out for having guns and either arrested or they'd be turned away. So he wanted them to remain armed and go down to the Capitol with or without him. There's that whole thing, I'll be leading you, I'll be going right there with you. And then he grabbed the steering wheel, and how much of that was drama and show, so he could say later on, I grabbed the steering wheel, and how much of it was he really, really was getting into a fight with his Secret Service agent, who he was not going to overpower. I can say a lot of things about Trump, but he's not about to overpower any Secret Service agent. So who knows if that was play acting or what. And then, of course, he didn't tamp it down. I mean, the judgment of history will be that if the thing really was going askew, and that was not what his state of mind was to make that happen, that Trump would have said, oh my goodness, and tamped it down within 5 or 10 minutes, because he knew very, very quickly that things had gotten completely out of control and they were threatening legislators. And, a lot of people have speculated that the reason he wanted to get out of control, he wanted some of the legislators to be killed or hurt, because that would be the pretense for martial law. Then he
that was what they really wanted to do, right?
And
they
he
wanted
could
to
say,
throw
oh my
everything
God,
off the
people are
tracks.
getting killed at the Capitol.
Right.
Who could debate with a president? People are getting killed at the Capitol. I had to call out the National Guard. I had to keep power. We couldn't have this chaos. And here I am. And there never would have been another election. People are thinking about inflation. They're thinking about other issues. But this is a big, big deal. Our democracy is the pride of our country, Mark, right? And we almost lost it that day. We really did.
Well, it's been in peril for a while, I think. And you can suggest that the perilous aspects of it may have to do with the vote. I don't know if we're going to have time now to get to that, but I'd love to discuss that another time. But I want to stay with the legal system as it grinds on toward the former president. And, he is fighting a few legal fires. In a way, just to put a button on what you were just saying, and we're going to have somebody who's a media expert, a journalist and a former media executive next week, talk about the effects, the ripple effects of the hearing and, the media coverage, but how quickly that fades. It just seems to evaporate into the ether. And so the public outrage just hasn't been there necessarily. Any clear-thinking person, I think, can look at this and go, wow, this is... And there were a percentage of independent voters, according to polling, that were influenced by this as well. But I just don't know what the effects will of everything that we saw and all the revelations that came to light, what they actually will be. That's the crazy environment in which we live. But he does have real court cases that are being pursued at the state level in Georgia and New York, and you can detail the threat to the former president and how long he can stall to essentially put off the inevitable. And will the inevitable ever come to pass? I'm talking about some kind of guilty verdict.
Pat and I talked about this for several years because we watched it, week to week with, him breaking the law, seeming to have broken the law with impunity, seeming to have the U.S. Supreme Court wrapped around his little finger, and they would delay things forever and stay things. His tax returns are a famous example. Here we sit, Mark, we have never seen this man's tax returns. So I think the peril for him, I think Georgia is a real thing. I think he's going to end up getting charged in Georgia. And I think he's going to, some of his associates certainly are, some of his Confederates like Giuliani down there, maybe even Meadows, he went into the state, maybe even Senator Graham. Then when you get to the January 6th insurrection, I think the evidence is very strong, but I think they're going to have to do that in layers. So I think we need to wait for about 2023 to see any serious action in that case. I think people like Stone, maybe Mike Flynn will be charged in that case. They'll see if they can turn them against Trump. Now that he doesn't have the power to pardon them, that'll help squeeze the door open a little bit. But of course, he's standing back and giving the illusion or maybe the promise of giving pardons to the people, even the January 6th marauders, even the Oath Keepers, if he gets back into office again, which I don't think he will. I think it's good to be scared of it and to act accordingly, but I don't think Trump will ever get the presidency again. And then finally, there's the Mar-a-Lago, where he's absolutely dead to rights. But I don't think that my reading of the law is that would not preclude him from running again. Being convicted of seditious conspiracy like the Oath Keepers, that does have a clause. If he'd been convicted by the Senate in the impeachment trials, that would have legally precluded him from ever holding federal office again. But if he gets nailed just for obstruction of justice for Mar-a-Lago, even if he's sentenced to prison, the man could run from prison. But I think they've hobbled him greatly with these investigations. I think he's lost the support even of many in his base. They may be putting up a brave front, Mark, but I think the reality is they've moved on. They think he has too much baggage. I don't think Trump will ever be president again.
It's worth just noting. So you're telling me that there are inmates, right, who are part of this controversy about should federal inmates be allowed to vote, and should inmates anywhere be allowed to vote? Should felons be allowed to vote? You're telling me, leave apart being allowed to vote, this guy could be convicted of obstruction of justice, absconding with these documents. I mean, what was it, 11,000 of them? Then that's just, it would, it makes hoarders blush, and he could still run and win the presidency.
100 had top secret seals on them. So it's kind of hard to say you didn't know that they were top secret or that you had a right to have them. The idea that he's filing a motion for return of property, 100 top secret documents, I didn't quite get the name of who our spy is who's next to Putin. I want to see that document and have it again so I can spell that spy's name correctly to do God knows what awful mischief with it Trump has in mind. But yes, he could run from his prison cell. I think a mayor in Boston won from his prison cell, but that was many decades ago. In reality, he couldn't run from his prison cell. He could legally, as a practical matter, and he's going to try, obviously. It certainly helps his brand, and as we've seen, there's the great grift. He scammed all this money with this ripoff, this $200 million that he put in his pocket, and he didn't even spend it as his base wanted him to try to, challenge the election, do something. He put it in his pocket. He means to spend it on himself. He charges us as taxpayers $1,200 a night for his Secret Service agents who have to stay at his hotel. I mean, stop the grift already. But it just seems like he comes up with things that are so brazen. They're so off the wall. It's hard for people, even the Democrats in Congress, to get their heads around some of the stuff that he did. But I want to just say this last thing. I think the January 6th Commission did a fantastic job. I think that McCarthy made a huge mistake in not putting some of his Republicans on there. As it wasn't the usual congressional hearing, which becomes a food fight. This was directed. It was like a prosecution in court. 8 sessions, and each one with a theme, each one showing that Trump had violated the law in different but awful ways.
Yeah, so well said. I think that's exactly right. It was not like, and to go back to Washington, D.C., I grew up there, and I went to a lot of those hearings. It was kind of fun when you're a kid, you go into this thing, but they are, as you suggest, just food fights, or they're just speechifying all the time. That wasn't what they did here. So it was something very, very different. Interesting, though, the timetable on everything you're talking about, David. What do you think the timetable on Georgia is? I mean, you've got a phone call, you've got him on tape. You have, it seems to me, all of this other demonstrable evidence relating to Graham and others. When can we expect something?
Well, I think that it's going to be the top people, but not Trump. And they're going to try to convict them and turn those people. They're going to want to have a couple of insiders. I know they have the tape recorded phone call made on, I think it was January 3rd, 2021, which says, find me 11,000 votes. And it clearly means concoct 11,000 votes that don't exist. But I think on that phone call alone, I think it's difficult to find proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And without his instructions to people like Giuliani and Meadows of what he told them to do once they got to Georgia, I think that's too hard and risky a case for the state prosecutor, the local DA down there. So I think she'll start with some of the insiders, like I said, people like Giuliani, maybe Meadows, a couple of the others. And then, like they do, like I did when I was a federal prosecutor, you get from the smaller fish to the big fish that you think is really the capo, you think is the real mastermind, and that's Trump.
Great stuff, David Katz. We hope you'll come back again. we want you to be our touchstone to so much of this stuff. And as I say, for me, it's a kick because I listen to you so regularly with Pat and was always such a fan. So thank you so much for being here today.
Well, it's my pleasure to be with you guys.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you'll be a regular, David Katz. Looking forward to seeing you again. All right, my friend. David Katz, everybody. Yep.
David Katz is the guy you wish was sitting next to you at Thanksgiving dinner. When your crazy old uncle starts rattling off all these things, you just, and your mind is spinning and you want to be able to come up with the facts and defend everything. You wish Katz was sitting next to you to just listen to this guy. Yeah.
Right. It's just like
you do not know what you are talking about.
You need that. You need that pushback. In the next hour, the master of spooky, his annual visit here. Jeff Dixon, writer, director, he will join us. We want your selections for the movies. It's not always gore, it's not always horror. There's psychological horror, there's psychological suspense. Some of these films in history get into your head that way. We'll talk to Jeff Dixon in the next hour. This is the Mark Thompson Show, and I just want to mention again, you need to like us. You need to hit the thumbs up, please. That's the way you keep us in the algorithm. You need to subscribe, if you would, please. I want to thank everybody who's gone to our Patreon page. What's that?
Are you begging people to like you?
I am begging. Well, it's come to that.
I feel for you. Like right now, I feel like I would like you just for that.
Yeah, I am begging. I really am begging. So I'm sorry, but you can go to our Patreon page, and I wish you would. And I want to thank, in fact, we're going to roll a few of the names of people who have contributed on Patreon. I hope your name is one of them. And I'm told the people who have contributed a little bit more, their names are bigger. Is that true?
Oh, are we doing that? Wow. I don't know how that happened.
Well, why not? We have some great incentives and some great fundraising related things that are still to come, but I could hug and kiss just like Andrew Cuomo does. Each and every one of you on the Patreon link who has made contributions to all of the effort that has gone into this show. So I want to thank you all for that. We'll take a break with Kim's News, then Jeff Dixon and everything scary. So
this is a big newscast because we're going to play sound right off the top. You ready for this?
I've got to get my sound ready.
Here we go.
Hang on.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by tax attorney Steve Moskowitz at 888-TAX-DEAL. The election will come down to who gets people out to vote.
I believe that we will have the mobilization to own the ground, to turn out the vote.
That is what House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said 3 weeks before America decides who controls Congress for the next 2 years. The California Democrat saying her party has a clear message on numerous topics, including freedom of choice for women and climate change. Many election forecasters, though, see Republicans as to retake the House, while the Senate is seen as more of a toss-up. 1/3 of Americans have a great deal or a fair amount of confidence in the media to support the news fairly and accurately. Only 1/3. That according to a new Gallup survey, which puts that number at 34%. 38% say they have no trust. The Federal Trade Commission is expanding its investigation into Visa. Federal agents want to know if Visa and fellow credit card company MasterCard are blocking rival payment networks from processing debit card transactions. According to the Wall Street Journal, the feds are focusing on a token used by the two card companies that don't share data with third-party digital wallets from Apple, Google, and the like. More people are losing their lives in California by just walking around. Out of all traffic-related deaths in the state, 25% involve pedestrians. That's up 4%. On top of that, 23% of the victims were left to die in the street. Data from the Office of Traffic Safety shows nearly 1 in 4 pedestrians were struck by hit-and-run drivers. Police say DUI and distracted driving make up for the most of the other deadly accidents. Police are putting another illegal gambling operation out of business. 2 homes being used as underground casinos were busted in San Jose. Police described them as a den of criminal activity, saying they were also used for drug deals. Officers found a shift crack cocaine conversion lab, along with several casino machines and stolen retail property. 7 people have been arrested there. 5 had outstanding warrants. And here's one for you, Mark. A DUI suspect is behind bars after leading police on a chase through Whittier. But the person wasn't driving a car on Saturday. No, they were aboard a horse, back a horse, I should say, not aboard. Police say the horse rider refused to follow the same rules of the road that drivers have to obey. When officers tried to pull that horse over, rider refused to stop and the chase was on. Eventually, the horseback rider gave up. The horse wasn't hurt, was taken into the care of the Whittier Police Department.
That's all we care about is the horse condition.
Did you know you could be charged with a DUI for being drunk on a horse?
Well, you can get charged with DUI for being drunk on a golf cart. So I guess, yeah, right. That makes sense.
But I mean, as well.
A horse isn't motorized, or I guess neither is a bicycle. Yeah, you've got to follow the rules of the road. And if you're drunk on something other than your 2 feet, I guess you get charged for it. The news sponsored by tax attorney Steve Moskowitz. For more than 30 years, Steve, who we dearly adore, has put his tax knowledge individuals and businesses alike. So if you need help with your taxes, please give Steve a call. It's 888-TAX-STEAL. He is a founding sponsor of the Mark Thompson Show. You can also reach him on the internet at moskowitzllp.com. I'm Kim McAllister on the Mark Thompson Show.
They had to close down an entire radio station to silence him. And now, he's here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Thompson.
What he's got going here is a situation.
Joe Fish, Sal the Shoemaker, Joe Box, and Little Anthony.
Mo Black's brother, Fat Andy.
The jerk store called. They're running out of you.
We have processes and protocols and standards.
I take full responsibility for my actions. Why are you yelling?
This is Mark Thompson. This is Mark Thompson. This is Mark Thompson. This is Mark Thompson.
Yeah! What up, everybody? Love it. Glad that you could hang out with us on this premiere week. Kind of our shakedown week, our big launch. That's why we ask you to like our show on YouTube. You got to hit that thumbs up. That's kind of the thing. That's the way the YouTube algorithm works. And then you got to subscribe. You got to subscribe if you want to support us. You want to keep us alive. And then, of course, we have Patreon. So all those ways you can keep this show part of your life and keep us part of your life. I'm very excited about this next guy. He's an annual visitor. He is, we call him the horror dude. I call him the master of scary, the master of spooky. He's Jeff Dixon, writer-director. He's come to grace us again. What's up, Jeff Dixon?
Hello, Mark. How are you?
I'm well. Big changes. Used to come to the radio station, and now you're.
I know.
Now
it's good to see you actually in person.
Yeah, it's cool. We were able to visit one-on-one this way. We're going to have listeners, and I'm telling you this as I tell listeners this and viewers this. Join us in the chat with questions and comments and some of their favorite, scarier movies. And that's all stuff that you'll be responding to along the way here. So you can just text it on the chat line.
Why don't you just text it?
And we'll pass all your comments on to Jeff. I want to ask you, first of all, about this new movie that Kim mentioned. Kim, what was the movie again? It's like it's a clown.
It's a
Terrifier
clown.
2.
Terrifier 2. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a resurrected murderous clown hunting down a teenage girl and her brother on Halloween. And it's so gross, it's to the point of causing physical reactions like vomiting and fainting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, the first one became kind of a cult classic because of that. I mean, they really leaned into the gore. They had a lower budget, and they're like, how do we stand out? Well, let's just go for it. And they went full gore, full crazy, full over the top. and it got a real big cult following. So what happens when you get a cult following? You make a sequel. So this is the sequel right now, and they kind of four-walled it, and they just kind of rented out theater screens, and it's gonna probably be another cult classic. So good for them. I love the mom and pop stories like that, where it's just like it's not a studio, it's not anything. It's just a bunch of people that love making horror stuff and like making people sick.
You know, Saw started that way. I know, Jeff's got a.
I mean, who wants to go see a movie that's going to make you vomit in the theater?
Well, don't you think they say some of that, Jeff, to just kind of juice the gate?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in Utah, so I grew up going to a lot of Sundance movies. And what's funny about the Sundance movies is they have a midnight section there. And so there's actually been a lot of horror movies be at the Sundance Film Festival. And so a lot of people that visit the Sundance Film Festival are not your typical horror patron. So they go see these horror movies, and so there's constantly stories of people getting lightheaded, people getting sick, people having to be escorted out. They're not the normal horror fan. So I love that. I think it's great. People should have their boundaries tested.
What does the trailer say? Bring your barf bucket. It's Terrifier 2.
Oh my God. What was Terrifier 1 barf inducing? Could you see it as being such?
Not for me, but yeah, I can see absolutely. I mean, there's some pretty aggressive stuff in it. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned low budget, though. Just let me ask you, because it does feel as though the horror and scary genre has been populated by a lot of these sort of lower budget things. You can still do a lot of what you want to do without a lot of money.
I actually, my personal opinion, I think that horror movies are better the less money they have, because I use examples of there was a time period where horror got really big and popular. And so they got bigger budgets. And there was, I won't say it because I don't want to badmouth anybody's movies, but there was a couple big studio movies that came out with a lot of money behind them. And because there was so big of a budget, they tempered it down and they didn't take any chances. And there's too much money on the line. They kind of vanillaed it all. And so when a movie has less of a budget, there's less to risk. And so people can take more chances. So there's a lot, I think the lower budget of a horror movie, usually there's a lot more creativity, because that's where a lot of the crazy, fun, pull yourself up by the bootstrap productions come from, and that's where the real ideas come from. So.
My friend was one of the producers of Saw, and Saw started as a little movie because the studio didn't want to take the chance with it. So they essentially said, okay, well, we'll just deficit finance it. As I recall, it's as he told me this, and I think this is more or less right. And so when Saw became this immense franchise, it's all that money that goes to those producers who took the chance on it originally.
Yeah, Saw actually played at Sundance, believe it or not. People don't think Saw Sundance, but that played in the midnight section there.
Now, that was also part gore, part, it seems, psychological intensity that was building in that, right?
Yeah, I mean, plus it's people love a twist ending. So if you have a movie with a twist ending, you're going to immediately get a bigger audience. But that's also James Wan, who I absolutely worship. So I think he's an absolute mastermind.
I don't even remember the ending of Saw. I know there've been 6 of them. So
there's actually been 6 of the originals, and then there's the new Jigsaw one, and then there was Spiral. So there's been 8, I guess, technically. No, shoot, there's been 9.
Yeah, right. I lost track after 6. I stopped counting after 6.
There was 7 of the originals, I think.
Again, on the chat line, I've got a couple of texts coming in about.
Why don't you just text it?
You can jump right in on the text chat on YouTube, and The Thing, The Exorcist,
classics.
Yeah.
I'm wearing a Thing T-shirt today, literally.
Well, The Thing, as you know, is my all-time favorite, but I don't really have it in me for the horror, or for scary, I should say. I shouldn't even. I mean, this is what I wanted to talk to you about. The Exorcist felt very real to me. It felt. It's interesting that we mentioned that classic. The Thing felt real too, but it was big real. I guess The Exorcist got kind of big with some of the stuff that happened to her.
Yeah. Plus, it's slightly based on a true story. So
very slightly. Yeah, you're right. But enough to hook you. Yeah.
It's the devil movies that get me, like Rosemary's Baby. That freaked me out. Children of the Corn, like the evil spirit thing. I can't even.
Well, it also connects with people if you grew up with religion. So if you grow up with any sort of religious movies just hit harder. So I mean that I grew up with religion, so religious movies always hit harder for me. It's just something that just is kind of inherent.
It's so funny that you aren't this snowflakey kind of guy, given you were raised Mormon, I think, right?
I was, yeah.
Yeah. And the Utah Mormon experience, you'd think you'd be like everything would freak you out, but instead you've embraced this genre. You are the guy. By the way, where is tell everybody your website, because you feature films all through the month of October, year round, but particularly through October, people come and they see the various films that you've featured.
Yeah, I started a blog, just kind of a janky little mom and pop blog, like a long time ago, because people are always asking me what scary movies to watch. So I just thought, okay, every day in October, I'll pick a different one. And I started this, and now I think it's like my 13th year doing it. I wish I could do it more year round. I'm way too busy, but in October, I kind of find a point to do it. So it's scaryhorrorwriter.com. It's pretty easy.
Scaryhorrorwriter.com to reach the... Does horror, gory scare you, Jeff, or affect you more than psychological stuff? Or is the psychological stuff that might not even have... I'll give you an example. I think I'll give you an example from... who is it? Who is it? It's from Key and Peele. Who is it?
Jordan Peele?
Yeah, Jordan Peele stuff. It feels like there's a psychological element to Peele stuff that is not necessarily as gory. Am I wrong? Maybe.
Well, what I think Jordan Peele does so amazingly, and what I think horror in general does amazingly, is that they can tap into various social issues and larger kind of themes that a lot of other genres kind of dance around. And so he's really leaned into that, which just inherently is psychological. So I love Jordan Peele movies. And I think Jordan Peele's, I still think Key and Peele is one of the funniest shows ever made. But the thing is I always think, and by the way, you asked me if I get affected by it. I'm affected by all horror. I say this all the time. If I just watched a horror movie and I would just lean back on my couch, like, don't open the door, boo-hoo, what are you going to do? I wouldn't enjoy them as much as I do. I'm affected by horror movies probably more than most people. I have to look down, look through my fingers, look away. No, but you would not think that I basically work in this industry because I am a total wuss, but I love it. I love the feeling. I love the anticipation. Like, it's the roller coaster, it's great.
Yeah, it is wild to think that, because how they're made, like, meaning, you really are someone who can spot a special effect. And, we all understand that it's cinema and it's fakery, but you really know the building blocks of that. So for you to still be affected is really, I think it's almost, you almost have to use a different part of your head, I would think, to when you watch something as a viewer. When you're watching, I would think you'd have to watch differently than you do as someone who works in the medium, as a director or writer.
Yeah, I think for me, and I know this is going to sound like so cliche and dumb, but it all comes down to the story. So if the story is solid and you have great characters, I can totally overlook a budget. You don't have to have any sort of massive set piece. You can have 4 people in a room, and if that story is there and those characters are fleshed out, then I'm in. So I think that to me is the most important. It doesn't even matter what it looks like. I can overlook any of that.
People saying the original Thing was really the Thing movie was in black and white, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I still, I guess this is just maybe my age or whatnot. The original Thing to me is Carpenter's, and I know it's not. I know. But that's the one that just hit with me and still hits with me. And you could watch it right now, and those effects are still just as good as they've ever been. I mean, Rob Bottin is an absolute genius. So, I mean, that I know it's not the original, but to me, it's my original.
Well, people are, I agree. I mean, I think I've told you this before. I just think that's almost a perfect movie. I mean, it's just, it's brilliantly executed in every way and totally believable. I mean, I watched it in my apartment on Russian Hill, and I was curled up on the couch. I mean, I wasn't watching it on television, a little, on a regular TV. I can only imagine what it was like in the theater.
Well, I do you know about the theory of the very end, of the ending of that movie, about who is the Thing? Have you heard about that?
Oh, whether one of the two guys
Have you heard the theory? The theory is that if you look closely through the movie, anybody who has been captured, or that is the Thing and is not the real person, doesn't have a reflection on their eyes. I guess they have a light supposedly where they reflected their eyes, and that means they're human. But other people don't have reflection on their eyes, and so if you watch that final scene, one of them does not have reflection on their eyes.
Great. That's great. I love that.
Perhaps there's some way to get the light inside the body.
We just got a text from Jennifer. She wants to know if you have an opinion on Halloween Ends.
I do.
Uh-oh.
Sounds
like
I know.
Well, our movie critic did not like it.
I'm really happy they rebooted the Halloween. I thought that the very first one of the new reboot was fantastic. I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's okay. He said that there were, as I recall, there were a couple of good performances or whatever, but yeah, he was not a big fan.
I love Jamie too. I worked with Jamie on stuff, and I think she's an absolute fantastic human being. So I will love anything she does. Yeah.
But let me ask you something about just a budget for these things, like a big sequel. They always say there's no money like sequel money. You know, everybody comes to the party and everybody's getting top dollar. Is that the way it is with the Halloween Ends? It's a really expensive undertaking.
No, you know, I got to say, I'm not here to badmouth it either. By the way, I'm not. I commend what they did, creating that new trilogy. I actually know a few people that have worked on it and stuff. So what they did, they took some chances. I really commend them for taking those chances in both the second one and the third one. It's just, you know, whether those chances hit with me personally are a little different, but I actually really commend them than just doing here's a guy killing people. Like, they actually took some chances and tried to do some originality, and I really commend them for the whole new trilogy. And they are money makers. I mean, Jamie's a queen, so she's going to bring in money.
Yeah, that part I think worked according to him. But anyway, I don't mean to dwell on that. I was just asking about the money part, because it seems as though it's a genre that for a long time was orphaned. You know, like it was sort of viewed as an other. You know, big Hollywood movies kind of ruled the day, and that's my impression of it. Certainly, those are the ones that punch through in 60s and 70s, et cetera. When did all of a sudden spooky, scary movies become? Is it literally now? I mean, it feels like though it's been a legit genre for about 10 years, but maybe it precedes that. That's just when I became aware of it as a legit genre.
It's funny. Legit genre is funny because I cannot tell you. My friends have heard me say this so many times, so I apologize if they're hearing this, but I can't tell you how many meetings I go in all for years in Hollywood, and they'll read one of my scripts or they'll see something and they'll want to meet with me, and they'll go, "No, I don't like horror, but." And that's the first thing they say to me. I don't like horror movies. I don't like horror, but it's almost like they have to like tell you that because it's below them. It's beneath them. Horror is so consistently seen as a genre that is lesser than others. And that frustrates me so much, because if you look at budgets versus profits, horror has been consistent nonstop. And I'll always say this defending horror. Horror is international. You know, comedy is not international because every culture finds something else funny. Their dialogue, they have something different, or this or that. Every culture, everybody gets scared exactly the same. So the fact that you can get scared the same, it plays international. And horror to me has been legitimate forever, but it is funny that it's still seen as lesser than a lot of other genres. People don't want to dip their toes in that water because they don't want to slum it. And you know, it still consistently makes money. Every year there's another article that comes out. Oh, is horror making a resurgence? It's just horror never went away. It's just people are almost ashamed of it. But I will say this, that kind of is part of the allure. Horror, we always have felt like the outsiders a little bit, you know? That's kind of fun.
Right. I mean, it's such a big, to call it cultish is not fair because it's such a big cult. You don't do the kind of box office they do and you know, get to call yourself cultish. And yet it does have a kind of cultish quality because you have people like me who just can't sit through something that's scary, you know. These psychological thrillers even just really get to me. But
why don't you just text it?
Let me check the text line. Carpenter's Prince of Darkness, a weird combo sci-fi horror, still creepy.
Oh yeah, I love all Carpenter, especially 80s Carpenter. Prince of Darkness is fantastic. It's even got Alice Cooper as a really creepy homeless guy.
Yeah, they note that here, actually. Crashed on the beach is notes. Yeah, Alice Cooper has that a cameo.
He also plays Freddy's dad in Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. By the way,
oh,
Alice Cooper's got a little bit of horror cred.
Was that the final Freddy?
No.
Okay.
I mean, it was of the original. It was of the original 6, but then they did Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which I think is great, actually. And then they, that Peter Jackson actually wrote the original draft of that. Freddy's Dead Part 6.
I didn't know that.
Nightmare
Wow.
6, yeah. And then they used a lot of the stuff he was going to use that they didn't use that script for in the Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which ended up being kind of a little bit of a, not a reboot, but a kind of a sideways, just a reimagining a little bit. Then they had the reboot later as well. So
your scariest, they're asking. Many people on the text line are asking. And the text line, by the way, you just jump into the chat and you can leave us a text, and I'll pass it on to Jeff Dixon, the master of spooky. What do you consider a few of your favorites that just really have stood the test of time?
Well, there's the holy ones. My favorite horror movie, when people ask me what's my favorite horror movie, is Dario Argento's Suspiria, the original.
Mm-hmm.
I, to this day, find that to be one of just the perfect versions of horror. The goblin score, the color he uses, like everything about that movie, I obsess over. But then additionally, I love The Shining. I love The Thing. Some of the lesser known, I guess, ones I love. I love a movie called Frailty that Bill Paxton directed. I love Poltergeist. My favorite movie of all time, which is horror / action, is Aliens. James Cameron's
the first
Aliens.
one,
actually the second one. First one would be considered more horror. Ridley Scott's Alien is basically a slasher in a ship, but Aliens is kind of more of a war movie. But I just think that movie is perfect from beginning.
That's
to
where
end.
they go back to the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yep. I love all the Alien movies, though. I even like the ones that people mock me for. I love Alien 3, David Fincher's first big movie. I think is great and underappreciated. I still liked Alien Resurrection, even though the hybrid alien in the end was a little weird. But I mean, I love all the Alien movies. It's just a genre that they're just fantastic.
Well, there are. It's just funny so I'm able to talk about this because I've seen these Alien movies. So I just mention a couple of things. One of the things I liked about the first Alien, then I'll tell you what I like. I agree with you on Alien 3. The first Alien, I like how the guys who are working like in the ship's engine room type thing. I mean, Yaphet Kotto and was it Harry Dean Stanton? I think they're complaining about the money they're getting, and they're complaining about having to go on this mission. That was so real.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like they were all scientists and anxious to explore. No. We're not, this is not in our contract to go to this planet. It's not in our contract. We're a cargo ship. I really loved that part.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on Alien 3, I like the fact I think there was a prison. Isn't there a prison thing?
Yeah, it's a prison planet. It was originally more of a monastery in the original version that slowly changed. But I mean, but
I just like the failure of an institution to protect people. It was that's what I took from that.
Like, not even a failure. It's almost like they become the villain because especially in the second one. I mean, the company wants them to get impregnated with the aliens so that they can use them. So that it actually is very anti-establishment in a way.
Yeah, exactly. I like the first Scream was great, says Jorge on the text line. The first Scream.
Why don't you just text it?
Now, Scream was is a series that has comedy and horror, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think the first Scream is genius. That is another example of just like almost a perfect horror movie. But I'll be honest, I like all 5 of them. I think I think it's a great series. The most recent one, which they just called Scream, but it's actually Scream 5. They introduced the idea of a requel, which is like a reboot sequel, kind of using some people from the original, but then bringing in new ones and kind of rebooting it. But it's also a sequel. I'm like, that was exactly the tone of the first Scream. And I thought it was really, really well done. So I think the whole Scream series is a lot of fun. I mean, as a film guy who went to film school, Scream 2 actually hit pretty hard because that one, takes place at a college and stuff. So I love the whole series.
Hang out for a second. I'm going to take news with Kim. and then we're going to get back with Jeff Dixon. If you, again, want to see his entire list, it's all on his blog. What is it again, Jeff Dixon?
ScaryHorrorWriter.com.
ScaryHorrorWriter.com. If you have any thoughts, email us at themarkthompsonshow.com. What is it? themarkthompsonshow@gmail.com. themarkthompsonshow.com will take you to Patreon, YouTube, etc. As we find our way, you'll find me a little clunky about asking for support, but essentially if you subscribe to our channel, you like by hitting the thumbs up, that gives us support. And of course, our Patreon is how we keep the lights on. So thanks to everybody who is supporting us and is working to make this show better. We're growing it now, and that means growing all the technical sides also. So we're trying to get phone lines put in, and we're trying to do all the things that will bring the show back to life. But when I say the show back to life, I mean back to the life you're used to at the old radio station. So really grateful to have Kim along, fabulous producer John Daly, and as I say, your comments as we continue with Jeff Dixon, the Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by tax attorney Steve Moskowitz at 888 Tax Deal. Stocks are rallying for a second day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average jumped more than 500 points after the opening bell before trimming gains. The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ also higher after strong earnings reports from the likes of Goldman Sachs. President Biden is linking abortion rights to the upcoming midterm elections. Speaking in Washington, D.C., President Biden said the overturning of Roe v. Wade has resulted in more than 25 million women being banned from getting an abortion in the state in which they live. The president said the number one way to protect women's rights is to elect Democrats to Congress. Meanwhile, top Republicans say the House Democrats created inflation and the party is going to stop it. The Republican Party, that is. Speaking 3 weeks ahead of the midterm elections, California's Kevin McCarthy said everyone is being hurt by inflation. He says everyone needs to ask themselves if they can afford to give up a month's wages because he said that is what Democrats have taken from them. President Biden's border chief is playing defense now after a report claimed he skips and then sleeps in some meetings. Politico interviewed 5 current administration officials who work with Border Protection Commissioner Chris Magnus. They all claim that he is disengaged and sleeps through key meetings as the border crisis worsens. In a statement, Magnus said he's been getting up to speed with his new job and that he is some tiredness as a side effect of his multiple sclerosis. Microsoft will reportedly lay off nearly 1,000 employees across the company. The news, first reported by Business Insider, later confirmed by Axios. Reports indicate the layoffs started Monday. They will impact workers across multiple divisions, including devices, Xbox, legal, and strategic tech positions. It appears to be the latest trend in layoffs across the tech industry. Already, companies like DocuSign, Oracle, and Uber have been impacted by recent layoffs. And it's a way to get your heart attack all in one place. McDonald's is adding Krispy Kreme donuts to the menu in an effort to drum up business. It's the latest move by the fast food giant to draw cash-conscious customers back to their restaurants. This report sponsored by tax attorney Steve Moskowitz. For more than 30 years, Steve has put his tax knowledge to work for individuals and businesses alike. So if you need help with your taxes, please give Steve a call, 888-TAX-DEAL, or you can catch him on the web, moskowitzllp.com. I'm Kim McAllister on The Mark Thompson Show. I could keep talking if you'd like.
Hi, Kim. How's it going?
It's good. How are you? I think
Not
Mark
bad.
dropped is what happened. Yeah, I think that's what happened. So if we're getting him back or how we're doing it, but I thank everyone for being with us because we are, with technical glitches as we figure out how to stream on YouTube and get everything done. So
Hey, Kim,
it's
can you
always
tap
nice.
dance?
Oh, wait a minute. Did I screw that
There
up?
he is.
I screwed
Hold
it
on,
up already.
He's back.
I'm so sorry.
But,
I'm so sorry, everybody.
yeah, technical
Jeff Dixon,
stuff.
master of horror. I screw this up because this is really, I haven't been doing this, and I have to, when I mute my mic so I could speak with you, I I blame you, Jeff Dixon. I really
you
do.
should.
Yeah, I really blame
really
you.
should.
Yeah,
I bring curses everywhere I
blame
go.
you and producer.
Whoever is producing this thing
right.
has no idea what they're
Sadly,
doing.
I'm producing it now. I mean, not really. John's producing it, but I have to do like 3 things, and clearly that's too many things for me to do.
If you get them in order, you get extra points.
I am so sorry, but this is why. If you
get it in order, you get extra points.
If you want me to get better, it's going to take money, ladies and gentlemen. Please find us. It's so simple. Like if you don't throw that switch, then the audience can't hear you. And literally, I forgot to throw that switch. So
I did the news, and then I said I'm Kim McAllister on the Mark Thompson show, as I do, as one does. And then there's silence, and we're talking about horror movies, and all I could think was, "You're gone." The live feed is gone. It was murder.
Yeah, well, I had a whole show going on over here, but it wasn't being heard.
Hey, it's happened on Station X before.
Yeah, that's true.
Murder?
That's true.
They do this to you all the time.
Yeah, they've had to wake a couple of board ups along the way. And,
they do this to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
Unfortunately, the they in this case is me. We're talking to Jeff Dixon about movies. This is an annual visit Jeff makes to our studios. Now, usually he's on the phone because we're in the studios, but now the studios are being occupied by, the old station's gone sports and gambling now, Jeff.
Degenerate gamblers.
Yeah. And I actually applaud degenerate gambling a little bit, so I can't be completely, but I wish certainly the show existed in that way. We're building in all those other elements, and so we'll continue to bring them forward. But Jeff is, as I say, an annual visitor, and he talks about movies that are eerie, creepy, spooky, gory, horrifying, the full range in that sort of mode of stuff that makes you jump or makes you uncomfortable. Someone on the text line, and we'd love for you to text. You can text into the chat, and we will pass it on to Jeff.
Why don't you just text it?
Bryce, shout out to Bryce. Hey, asks, does Jeff like the Silence of the Lambs sequels?
Yeah, I do. I like Hannibal. I like Red Dragon. Well, technically that's not a sequel, but I think that the best of all the Silence of the Lambs stuff is actually the Hannibal TV series that Brian Fuller put out. That's probably my favorite horror TV series of the last decade. It's just, I thought it was genius in every way.
Those things that started as film and then have come to television, like the Hannibal TV series, is there other examples of that, right?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, the line is so blurred right now between what's a film and
streaming
what's TV.
and,
So it's just like a lot of the limited series stuff, especially a lot of the stuff that Mike Flanagan is doing on Netflix. They're essentially, like Haunting of Hill House or Haunting of Bly Manor, or they're essentially just very long movies. 8 episode, 10 episode, and then they're done. So it's almost like just very lengthy films that don't continue beyond that, and so it's just the line is really blurred between the two.
Of those streaming services that you mentioned, of the Netflixes and Hulus and all the rest, are there any of them that are particularly good when it comes to spooky horror?
Shudder, man. Shudder, if you're a horror fan at all, Shudder is the best streaming service out there. It's literally the first thing I usually turn on. It's all I mentioned Sundance and watching a lot of horror movies there. Well, there's a ton of horror or non-horror film festivals that play horror movies, and a lot of those festival movies have a hard time finding homes. Shudder picks them up. So I'm telling you that there's one movie on there right now I got to give a shout out to because it's just one that I love. It's called Deadstream, and it was filmed in Utah. So obviously my Utah connections run thick.
I see.
But it's basically Evil Dead meets a found footage movie. It's basically like a Twitch streamer who goes into a haunted house and things go severely awry.
That's a great idea.
But it's really funny too.
It's a little Blair Witchy, then you're saying?
Little Blair Witchy, little Evil Dead-y, obviously done for like $10, but it's all practical effects.
And it's funny, you're saying also.
It's really funny.
Oh, wow.
It's funny, it's scary. Just like, Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, even the original Evil Dead, there's a comedy to those that are just I'll say this little pitch. I say this all the time. Comedy and horror are so connected because think about every time you get really scared. What's the first thing you do after a jump scare? You laugh. You get scared and then you laugh. They're connected so much more than people realize.
But there's and what is the, I'm sorry, and what's that called again? That one that you particularly
Deadstream. That's, okay. I think it's only on Shudder right now, or it might be on pay-per-view, but I know that it's streaming free on Shudder. But I'm telling you, if you're a horror fan at all, that site rules.
Within the genre, is there a boo scary, like a jump scary, versus the creepy psychological terror that you may feel at?
Oh yeah, they're literally just called jump scares. I mean, but the funny thing about jump scares is there's even versions of jump scares that are earned jump scares and cheap jump scares. Your cheap jump scare is open the closet, here comes the cat. You know, the old cliche cat jumps out. Okay, great. You didn't earn that. But what I like to call an earned jump scare is I like to use the example of Paranormal Activity. Paranormal Activity set up this amazing thing where it's like, you know, there's something haunting them during the sleep. So they set up a camera to see what it is. Well, during the daytime, that's your safe zone. And then at the nighttime in the camera, that's when you get all tense. And then it's daytime, so you exhale. Nighttime, you get all tense. Daytime, exhale. They set up this pattern so that every time it's daytime, you let down your guard as a viewer. You're like, oh, this is the safe zone. And there's a time when they go into the kitchen and they're talking and this is the safe zone. And all the cupboard doors open at the same time. And you lose your mind because you've been... You've been conditioned
That's terrific.
This isn't supposed to happen.
Safe. Yeah, this is the safe time. So that's an earned jump scare where they actually put thought into it and earned it. But it's not just, let's just put a sting of music and have a cat jump out. That's more of anyone can do that.
Sure. That's terrific. That's terrific. And somebody on the text line also asked
Why don't
about,
you just text it?
Text line is the chat line, by the way, on YouTube. Do you, hang on a second, I'll get to that movie. Carmela, shout out to Carmela, says, hi, Mark. I know we were talking about movies, but my favorite TV show is The Walking Dead. Amazing show, great effects and great characters. Yeah, we're talking about anything that, you know, is in that genre of TV and film. But what about The Walking Dead? I mean, that franchise had intense mass appeal.
Oh, I will fully admit, I loved The Walking Dead for years and years and years. And I just got oversaturated. There were spin-offs of and just constant, they just kept continuing. And I just kind of like went, okay, it's time for me to move on. I only have enough bandwidth. Right. And they kind of lost me a little bit once they did a few things. But I loved it for a very long time. And it's a juggernaut. And it's amazing what they've done. It just went on a little too long for me.
This from Yvonne.
Why don't you just text
What's
it?
Considered the first horror movie, Jeff?
Well, that's a little bit trickier, but I would say
they made them in silent movies.
Oh yeah, like Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or the Nosferatu. I mean, there's a lot of those that are absolutely terrifying silent films that, by the way, you watch Cabinet of Dr. Caligari today, it still hits. You know, and the original Nosferatu still hits. In fact, Robert Eggers, the guy who did The Witch, that I absolutely love, in The Lighthouse, and he is remaking Nosferatu, which is actually kind of exciting.
Jorge writes,
why don't you just text it?
Ring, Juwan, Train to Busan, Audition.
All four, great. Yeah. I mean, the original Ringu is fantastic. I thought the remake of The Ring was absolutely fantastic. Gore Verbinski's visuals in that are absolutely stunning. Train to Busan is that is such a fun movie. That's like the extreme fast zombie movie, and it's just so good.
It all takes place on a train, or what happens?
Almost all takes place. I mean, there's some scenes where they go into the stations and stuff like that, but a majority of it takes place on a train, and it is just. They're actually, or I think they're done filming. They remade it. It's there's an English language remake coming out, I think next year with, I could be wrong, I don't have my computer near me, but I think it's with Leonardo DiCaprio actually.
Oh wow.
But yeah, that movie is absolutely fantastic. Audition, one of the craziest midpoint switches of a movie ever.
What's that about?
Well, it starts out as a guy looking for love. And it turns into something very, very different. And it's considered to have some of the most disturbing scenes ever toward the end of that movie. And I would say they're probably right. That director, Takashi Miike, is kind of known for his very disturbing stuff. He has another movie called Ichi the Killer that is probably the most violent, depraved movie ever made.
Oh. That's it.
What was the other one? There was
I
four
feel like
in
that
there.
should be on a poster. The most violent, depraved movie ever made.
There's a movie that came out this past year called The Sadness. That I think it is actually on their poster. I think it literally said the most depraved movie ever, or something like that. And by the way, it's an amazing movie, but it's pretty depraved.
That's what I was saying to you, Kim. So that stuff you were talking about, it's it's all stuff to juice ticket sales.
People want that. Yeah. I don't want that.
The Purge, Greenfly09 on the text line says The Purge. That's where one day a year people get to go and do whatever they want, or is that what that is?
Ultimate wish fulfillment movie. Yeah, the first Purge was a little bit of a letdown for me personally, because it was like this great concept of just this, it's this, you get one day to do anything, and then it all basically takes place in like a home invasion, so it's like one place. But then as the sequels went on, they realized, people want to actually see the Purge. So every Purge movie that's come out since has gotten crazier and crazier and crazier. And they're actually, those are just fun. They're turn your brain off and just go have some fun. Like those Purge movies are a blast.
Do you count Poltergeist 3 as horror only?
Well, I don't think anything is only horror. I think most movies cross into more than one genre, but I love Poltergeist 3. I know it's kind of poo-pooed on a little bit, but I think it has some of the most incredible effects, practical effects ever, because that whole thing takes place around mirrors, and the director did all sorts of interesting tricks with the camera to make people look like they have multiple reflections, because you can't obviously film in a mirror, you'd see the cameraman. So that movie actually has some incredible effects. But I really like Poltergeist 3, but that sadly is the one where the actress who played Carol Ann died. So it has a very abrupt ending that most people are like, wait, it just ended and the credits rolled? That's kind of why. So, but the movie itself, I think, is actually pretty good. Tom Skerritt rules.
We got a text from Eric who says, Poltergeist freaked me out. When I was a kid, I couldn't sleep with the closet closed for years.
The original Poltergeist still holds up. I mean, that clown, I know it's like cliche to be afraid of clowns now, but I've always been terrified of clowns. And that clown in Poltergeist, oh, dear Lord. Yeah.
I was on the MGM lot, now the Sony lot, back when Poltergeist was being shot, the first one that Spielberg directed.
Toby Hooper, actually, but that's...
is that right? It was a Spielberg movie.
It was... Well, there's actually controversy about that, because
is that
supposedly Spielberg kind of came in and did some directing. But if the credits actually, it's Toby Hooper. Spielberg produced. Toby Hooper, did Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Right. So, there's a little bit of...
That's interesting. That explains this next thing, because I snuck onto the set with my brother who was visiting. We were both visiting L.A. I think I was living in the Bay Area. And I had a connection at MGM. I forget exactly how I'd worked there on the show Chips with the motorcycle cops, Anyway, blah, blah, blah. We sneak onto the set, and it's a closed set, and there's signs everywhere, closed set. And all I was doing was looking for Steven Spielberg, but I couldn't find him. But they were shooting the sequence where she says, walk into the light. They're like, there's a flashing light on her, which they did in a really kind of low-tech way, actually, on the set. But it was one of the great thrills to see that movie come out, and then it became a big deal. It became like a really cool brag for a while that we were on the set when it happened.
That's amazing, by the way. That's one of my favorite facts about you, I think.
Okay. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Shaun of the Dead. Gary says, I'm not a horror fan, but Shaun of the Dead is one of the greats. A must-watch in my book.
Absolutely. Shaun of the Dead is one of the greatest horror comedies. I mean, Edgar Wright's a genius. I love all of his movies. Scott Pilgrim is one of my top 10s probably, but Shaun of the Dead is the perfect example of how you can take something that has existed, like the zombie genre, put a little twist on it, add some comedy, and come up with something completely and absolutely original. So that movie is fantastic.
I was looking to see if there were any emails also, but I've got a bunch of texts. I just want to. Marilyn says, I lived in a haunted house. Nothing has scared me more than that.
Lucky.
The Naked Desire says, I really like Shocker.
Shocker, yeah. Wes Craven. That movie is a ton of fun. It's of its time for sure. Serial killer that gets electrocuted and then can kill people via electric currents from beyond the grave. So that's a total fun movie, yeah.
This has been great. I'm just trying to get a few more before we have to say goodbye. But it's interesting that some people see films that you wouldn't necessarily consider horror or spooky as in the genre at all. B. Biaggi Rodriguez says Parasite.
Oh, yeah.
I don't see that as a...
It is. Okay, that's funny you bring that up. So that has actually been Parasite actually opened up a pretty big conversation about what people consider horror. Because some people are like, oh, no, that's not horror at all. And people are like, well, did that terrify you? Yeah. Then that's horror to them. You know what I mean? So I think horror is a little bit in the eye of the beholder, or something can have horror elements to it that might not be a flat out horror movie. That's kind of what I would consider Parasite. I wouldn't consider Parasite I wouldn't label it as just a horror movie,
sure,
but it 100% has horror elements, especially if you found people living in your house like that. So, I mean, it's kind of eye of the beholder stuff.
We have to wrap up. Tiffany says, hello from the 510 and shout out to the 510. Do you like The Conjuring? Annabelle, she asks.
Conjuring is, again, back to James Wan, I think one of the best haunted house or possession type of movies ever. Like, I think The Conjuring is fantastic. I actually like The Conjuring 2 more. I love The Conjuring 2. And some of the Annabelle movies, especially the third one, actually, Mike Flanagan did one of those two. No. Oh, anyway. But a couple of the Conjurings or Annabelle sequels are fantastic as well.
Jeff, it's so cool that you spend time with us every year at this time. We love talking movies with you, spooky movies, and I'm glad the audience has found us to the point that we were able to ask you about a lot of stuff. We want to show you love. You got the blog going through the month of October and beyond. You do it all the time, but it gets a lot of traffic during the month of October. Again, it's
scaryhorrorwriter.com.
Scaryhorrorwriter.com. Love seeing you, pal.
Always so much fun.
Yeah,
Always.
Really enjoy it. Jeff Dixon, everybody, come on.
Yeah.
Hi, Jeff.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, good times. Standing by, our number one, our exclusive. We're not seeing any other sponsors. He's our guy. Talking about the great Steve Moskowitz, the tax ninja. If you have a tax issue of any kind, you may be kept up at night for any number of reasons. You may not even have paid your taxes. I fell into that for a while. You know, you just get scared. You don't have the money, don't know what to do. Or you may be a small business owner looking to get a piece of the government pie, and there is pie coming your way in the form of ERC. Hi, Steve Moskowitz.
Hi, Mark. You know, when you were talking about horror, I thought that was my promo.
Yes. It is the chill that the tax code gives most of us is pretty horrifying. So
it is, but there's a good part to it too, and that's the ERC part. This is where the government is giving away up to $26,000 for every employee that you have that qualifies. And there's a lot of confusion. What do you have to do to qualify? There's two ways. There's the easy way, and I'm going to call it the complicated way. The easy way is your gross revenue went down by a certain percentage. That's it. It's a number. Either you're there or you're not. Nothing to talk about, nothing to think about. But you know, Mark, a lot of firms, a lot of CPAs are telling their clients that's the only way to qualify. And it's not. If you look at the IRS website, it says there's two ways and either or will qualify. Now, the other one's more complicated. It's a facts and circumstances test. The formal name is a full or partial closure. Well, what does that mean? In California, there was a statewide mandate from the beginning of the pandemic until 6/15/21 that said if you have a business that operates inside, even an essential business like Safeway, you can only use 25% of your store. That was Safeway's case. That's a partial closure of 75% of your store. Or if you had supply chain disruptions, or a lot of other things too. So we'll actually take the time to sit down with you and see, do you qualify? Now, not everybody qualifies, of course. And if you don't, we'll tell you why. But if you do qualify, let's go ahead and get every dollar to which you're legally entitled. And for a lot of business owners, this can be a lot of money. It's just amazing how much money is flowing out to the government. If you're legally entitled to it, by all means, let's go ahead and get it.
I have a couple of questions for you, and I don't have any time for you to really answer them. So let me one is about
we'll just take a minute of Nikki's time. Okay.
S corps, whether you can help people with S corps at all. Taxes.
Absolutely. What an S corp is, a regular corp is a C corp. It pays its taxes. The individual pays taxes. It's double taxation. If you're an S corp, you only pay taxes once. C corp pays it twice, and you can convert from a C to an S. When you incorporate, you start out as a C automatically. You have to ask to be an S.
Wow.
What?
Okay.
That's right.
Anyway, you'll take anybody with an S corp and guide them through the process. The other thing is, I got an email from Sonoma County saying, "Does Steve handle
a lot of positive
Does he handle Sonoma County?" Of course he does. He handles the whole Bay Area and the whole country. There can be people who are watching us in other states. Steve Moskowitz can help you. Please reach him, 888-TAX-DEAL, 888-TAX-DEAL. The other way you reach Steve is MoskowitzLLP.com. Steve, thank you so much again. Love seeing you every day, my friend, and thank you.
I love it too. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, pal. Steve Moskowitz. Wrapping up, everybody. Cool visit with Jeff Dixon. Some cool emails. I'll have to get to some of those as the week goes on. Is David K. Johnson coming back? Asked Chad. Yes, he is. He's on a 7-week vacation. He talked about it on this show, but he is coming back after that 7-week vacation. So David K. Johnston will be back. That's from Chad in Reno. Is there a text line I can make use of? Yeah, there is the live chat. Right now, that's the way you get in touch. It seems to be working.
You know what I love about it is on the old way, people would text us and they may or may not get a response back. But now on the chat line, everyone can see what everyone else is writing. So you can see what other listeners have to say as well, or viewers, I should say now. But it's kind of cool because it becomes more of a chat community where people on the chat line are conversing with each other, and that's fun.
That's exactly right. Ditto. Right on, girl. You can get back to...
You know what's interesting, though? There's less hate.
There is less hate.
Oh, nice.
Where did the hate go?
I don't know if it's nice or not. I guess it is nice. You want hate, Mark? We can get you hate. No, but John is right.
Fabulous producer, John Daly.
It is a place where people have come because they generally like what we're doing. And I understand that we might disagree about certain things or whatever, but in general, you like what we're doing.
Well, the trolls are probably still under the bridge with the AM radio.
Yeah, speaking of liking, please hit the like button. You've got to hit that like button because that helps us. Every episode, you've got to hit the like button. I know it seems weird. I like the last episode. Okay, yeah, but you've got to hit every episode.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Yeah, smash it with your iron rod. I would do that. And you should subscribe to the channel and share it. I know it seems like we've done pretty well in the early going here, but we've really got to keep it going. You can go to our Patreon page to keep the lights on. We're trying to get Kim and John and the magical Tony some money. And
Chris, thank you.
Yeah, so let's try.
We don't want to sell out to Cars for Kids. Come on, people.
I'd like
exactly.
To grow
and
the
Steve
show
Moskowitz
as well.
helped us also.
I'd like to grow it, and I think that one of the ways we do that is by having people post the link to the show on their social media. Tell other people about it because let it to be a bigger thing, and we stay and we get to do this. So I'm very grateful for all the support. If you can keep supporting us and share the show link on your page and themarkthompsonshow.com, great way to find us there. That's another great way to support us.
So true. Exactly what Kim said. So if you need to reach us, it's the Mark Thompson Show at gmail.com.
I want to apologize to Chris's family.
Look, I wanted to mention a follow-up quickly before the end of the show, and I want to thank a listener for this. It is Tom. Tom, thank you. Corden unbanned. We started this show by telling that James Corden had been banned by that restaurant in New York. All is forgiven. Keith McNally unbans James Corden from Balthazar following an apology. So he is unbanned after he was misbehaved. He called me and apologized profusely, is the quote. Having effed up myself more than most people, I strongly believe in second chances. So James Corden is back on. There you go. We've bookended the show. This is interesting. Eddie says on the text line before was more anonymous and people felt like they could be meaner. No one would know who they were. That's actually that could be as well. So thank you, everybody who's joined us today. This is the end of our magical show. I've enjoyed our time. We are finding our way, getting used to some new systems. We need your support, and definitely appreciate your tolerance. Stay tuned for Nikki over on her channel. The Nikki Maduro Show. It's Nikki. The Nikki Maduro Show. Catch her, and Kim continues there with Nikki. Yeah. There's a reason this place is fun.
There's a reason that this place is fun.
Oh, yeah. I do like
Oh, my God.
I know. Any last words? Fabulous producer John
Shelley Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show.
Okay, well.
Bye-bye.
Are we out of time?
I think we are. Sounds to me like we're out of time.
That's it.
Thanks, everybody.
Out of time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.